So an interesting thing happened to me recently about a year ago when I started playing Tears of the Kingdom, and realized that what filled my heart was not a fantastical sense of adventure and whimsy, but rather the debilitating weight of my adult responsibilities. There is so much to do in open world games nowadays, and it sucks. Cause you can't expect to give me a grocery list and then tell me that 3/4 of it is stuff I can just pick up if it's along the way. I'm already at the store and I'm not going back for at least like 2 years when I think it might rekindle my original nostalgia for buying fruit. Look, it's just that if there's any kind of box I can check and add to the pile, I feel like I have to do it. And I'm not alone in feeling like this. Probably. Hopefully. Definitely, at least I think. Because we all feel the need to collect things, whether they're actually impressive or not, or whether they're meaningful regardless of your ability to pay an electrical bill or not. But when the sound of podcasts isn't enough to drown out the fact that the have to in your life is directing its energy to a labyrinth designed by someone who thought business was a good use of 4 years, a gal might start to wonder, why do we feel the need to collect things in video games? And if there's an answer to that, it's gotta be psychology. That's right, baby. We're diving back into a well I only have a passing understanding of. Only this time, I did some big boy research and made the stunning discovery that you can get paid for writing basically anything. Like truly, as long as you have an et al next to your name, someone is bound to misconstrue what you're doing as actual work. But these papers are about the best way we have of answering our question, so let's do our best to ignore Wikipedia's attempts at fully covering its bases as usual. Oh, but here's a familiar name. Fraud, who seemed to think collecting stems from a desire for comfort. You know, Freed gets a lot of shit for his shit theories, but before we had actual standardized methods for studying psychology, throwing shit at the wall was about the best you could do. The problem is Fraud had a massive shit fetish, and an uncomfortable level of confidence as he stood in front of a conference room filled with old people, and described how collecting behavior stems from traumatic experiences with shit. He thought potty training was so mortifying to a child that it could cause them to feel a loss of agency over their own bodies. And this trauma would then express itself by me needing to spend 30 minutes in the Velvet Room with a fusion calculator pulled up to compensate. But just none of that happened. None of it. Feeney was onto something though, because even if it doesn't have anything to do with childbirth, people do get a sense of comfort from their collections. Try not to feel comforted when you're drowning in mounts, assuming you're into that sort of thing. Most of the time, this comfort stems from positive associations you've got with the thing you're collecting. Like, it's pretty easy to assume what kind of childhood those people with Garfield rooms had, and the same thing can probably be said about the type of person who got super attached to The World Ends With You and wanted to explore everything that world had to offer. It's that positive association you've got with the game, however it is you got it, that makes you want to explore every corner in order to prove you're not a fake fan. Eventually, this becomes a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where it's more so your familiarity with the thing you like than the thing itself. Like how you always go back to watching the same comfort videos despite not finding any of the jokes funny anymore. 'Cause that's what it means for a house to become a home. It makes you sad now. But when it comes to collecting in video games specifically, there's also something to be said about the safety in being well stocked that inevitably turns into hoarding until you learn to fucking live a little. Or the satisfaction of having worked towards a set of accomplishments and getting to check them off. Or sometimes just liking a thing. And now you have it now. Because at the end of the day, when you're living in a world filled with things you'd rather not be constantly surrounded by, it's no wonder you could spiral into wanting to absorb yourself into a world made of positive associations where every step of the way you're assured that what you're doing is a super job, kiddo. But to put it a little less daddy issuesy, when a thing makes you happy, you like it. But that still doesn't explain the have to part of collecting. And for that, look no further than evolutionary psychology. You see, physically we haven't changed much for the past 300,000 years. So just as much as if you put a tiger in front of a computer, a homo will do whatever comes naturally in that situation. As it turns out, the natural thing is hoarding. Yes, the children still yearn for the mines, and people, they expect a very harsh winter. Back in the day, if you had food stocked up, you were more likely to survive. And if you had an incredibly obnoxious voice in your head that wouldn't let you breathe until you built up that stockpile, you would have done a whole lot of surviving. But that voice stuck around, and it's still gotta be scratched by something. And if it can't feed you, it might as well take up an inventory slot. This survival tool, more commonly known nowadays as annoying in the best case and mental illness in the worst, is responsible for our innate desire to collect things. But then it kept going to where the people who had all the stuff thought that made them genuinely better than the people who didn't have any stuff. And they said it so confidently, surrounded by all their stuff, so they sort of just got to do whatever. And then everyone wanted to be someone with stuff because the people with stuff clearly mattered, and they wanted to matter even if the people with stuff were the only ones who decided that having stuff meant you mattered, and that is what led to materialism. A society where having stuff is viewed as important, which puts a lot more value on the stuff. Circles. Funny how that works. In fact, our stupid massive brains being so good at finding patterns that were never there to begin with is the reason humanity wound up such a high-concept species with unique behavior like societies, planning, guilt, depression, and late-stage capitalism. But funnily enough, collecting isn't one such behavior. Even crabs do it, and they don't have hands. Of course, without our efficiency enhancers, their reasons for doing it are completely different. For instance, decorator crabs gather bits and bobs from their environment and use the Velcro-like hairs covering their shells to attach them to their bodies, acting as a nifty form of wearable camouflage. Gumwing skeletonizer caterpillars do a similar sort of thing, using the head casings from the exoskeletons they've outgrown to form a tower on their head resembling a hat, a word that might trick you into thinking it's cute until you remember the head casings part. They do this for reasons truly incomprehensible to man, but perfectly reasonable to a moth. A lot of insects are in the habit of corpse collecting, either for the physical protection or the hormonal, using the scents given off by the bodies to deter any unwanted company. The complete opposite of what the infamous bowerbird does, collecting piles and piles of blue to woo potential mates because it resembles the coloring of their plumage. Bowerbirds put so much effort into their collections, starting with the construction of the bower itself. They not only have to build the thing, but then maintain it year-round on top of 9 grueling hours every day, searching for blue flowers, shells, feathers, bugs, and plastic. Longer than a 9 to 5, this little bird juggles its ceaseless work with its need to eat, rest, and survive, delving onto the surface where any second a cat could jump at the opportunity to ruin its owner's afternoon. With the weight of this responsibility, some resort to theft. Others double down and painstakingly crush up pigment with their beaks to create their own dye, all for just the chance of attracting a mate so they can attempt to win them over with a routine they've tirelessly rehearsed in between everything consisting of strutting and bowing and dancing every which way. And does a rejection deter the bird after all that sweat and tears ends in failure? Do birds sweat? No! He would do it all again, pushing that boulder up that mountain, proudly standing by his work even when nothing comes of it in the end, living and dying by the struggle and finding meaning regardless of its form, because that is what motivates you to make a collection. All that to say, gamers have historically tried replicating that behavior, finding modest success in places like Animal Jam, Ponytown, and Destiny 2. Regardless, people still collect skins, outfits, and other cosmetic items in order to accessorize and socialize, even if their idea of socializing is making other people think they're a girl and questioning the fact that they don't feel like correcting them. Thankfully, there's all sorts of people out there like that, and bonding over their similar tastes is another reason to make a collection that shows them off. And when it comes to showing off your collection, it also becomes about how you show it off. Like the majestic bowerbird, the way a collection is presented goes into how it's perceived. So people like putting in that extra effort to organize and curate their inventory, equipment, or sometimes their literal in-game collections to craft monuments of the things they like and what they went through to get it. But rather than just showing off your stuff to people who might relate, sometimes it's better to bond over the collection process itself, exchanging tips, tricks, and advice to turn it into a group hang. What's extra cool about games as a digital medium is that, well, for one, you can connect with anyone, anywhere, anytime. Don't need me to tell you that, they've been saying it since the 90s. But specifically communicating about how to collect these things is way easier than if you wanted to find someone to bond over your love of, say, garden gnomes. Just look it up and bam, community posts, bam, discords, bam, 15 different articles about where you can find everything on a comprehensive map. Point being, the things we choose to collect are a thing that we choose to do, as much as our hobbies, outfits, and other choices all act as ways of expressing ourselves and finding like-minded people. Or just people whose ways of thinking are interesting, cause you'd sooner see me dead than breeding a golden chocobo, but god if I don't want to shake the hand of someone who actually did. Or not. Connecting with someone who irrationally cares about the same stupid things you do is a great motivator for pursuing that stupid thing that still doesn't explain anything, because so many people feel the need to achieve this despite an upvote on Reddit being the only connection they get out of it. That's 600 hours for a pixelated sticky note while a more productive 10,000 scowls at you in the corner. That's not comforting. And it's definitely not survival, distracting yourself from the stuff that actually matters with fucking So why the restlessness then? Why the have to? Why is it so important I chase after a goalpost tucked miles away from the main road down a winding trail paved by wasted effort? You know, most real-life collectors don't even have a goalpost for their collections. They just keep growing and growing them until they decide to either stop or die. But collectibles in games fulfill a set of rules laid down by the developers, so you know exactly when you've achieved completion. It's not really a personal endeavor anymore then, more of an assignment. Like, I might have been the one who chose to play this game and formed a really personal connection with it, but I'm not the one who decided that fucking golden walnuts were something worth pursuing. Someone else told me they were, the person who made this world I'm existing in right now, and so they are. And someone else telling you it matters is what makes it suddenly seem so appealing. Kinda like work turned in, an assignment complete, steps towards promises of happiness, and head pats from Mr. Minora for playing his game so dang good. You get a hit of dopamine for being productive without having to be productive at all, so long as you can misconstrue burning wrinkles into your forehead from the blue light as actual work. Because golden walnuts, completed compendiums, pins, slots, guns, armor, and achievements only trap you in this series of addictive short-term dopamine cycles that are so much easier to distract yourself with and parade around as genuine fulfillment, rather than actually sitting yourself down and working towards something that could really change your life. It's funny, I think Royal was the first game I ever 100%ed. Not that that's saying much, they sort of baby-fied it from the original. But I still remember beating the Reaper for the first time, and how big of a deal that was. All the way back in those early pandemic days when it was actually sort of charming for someone who didn't have anything better to do. Then a year before then is when I nearly transferred schools because the old one was depressing but familiar, and the new one was depressing and unfamiliar. And also, I got an Ultima Blade, also. In 2022, was a winter break where I managed to accomplish a lot of things I never thought I would. And from now until the day I and my legally non-transferable PlayStation account die, these achievements stand as obelisks to memories I made while pursuing a hobby that, despite being a massive jock, technically is a big part of who I am. But while gamers aren't punting balls and kicking logs like me, they're still making memories too. You know, I might have been recapping a lot of what these articles spent thousands of dollars to research and write about, but one thing I absolutely have to plagiarize word for word from this specific article is a survey they conducted to figure out patterns in collecting behavior in gamers. Now, aside from the very hilarious revelation that there's a gamer personality test called Brain Hex, what really stood out to me is the amount of people who were into collecting trash, just like literal garbage, without a single in-game motivator to enforce it. There were the ones who collected slightly more understandable things, like shiny gold cards that were functionally identical to the common ones because they liked how the pixels on their monitors were changed to slightly different colors, or people who wanted to collect a specific set of cards, like elemental dragons, just for the sake of it. But then there's the ones who figured this academic survey was a great opportunity to gush about this cool unique human skull they found in Skyrim. It doesn't have any story significance, they say, and it doesn't have any utility, they say. It does have a different texture, they creepily say. But more importantly, there's only one of them. Then there's this person who assumed the mission of collecting teddy bears in Fallout to honor the victims of a war that isn't even actually happening right now. And this other person found genuine excitement in collecting gray pieces of armor, mainly just because they liked the idea of being an explorer. Like, it's wild, but these people, rather than seeing collecting as a chore or a task to check off, or an assignment granted by someone with the power to limit the level of choice I have in this very exhausting world, find collecting fun, and comforting, and fulfilling, and meaningful, because it makes them happy to have the things they like. Look, I'm sure someone put a lot of effort into making this chart here. The minimalist coloring does a great job at guiding the eye, but no matter how many calories you try to burn thinking about it, there is simply a succinct and unalterably pure joy in collecting pets, all of them. It makes you feel safe and validated by your things, like an extension of the life you've built that hopefully you're proud of. In gaming, that means taking part in a world you love and proving your value in existing there by doing everything it has to offer. But sometimes, we can spiral into wanting to distract ourselves with that rather than our real lives, where 20.28 million people haven't accomplished the exact same things you have in quite the same way you do them. Because sometimes doing things is kind of hard. Like, it never feels like it's building up to anything that's worth anything. It's a lot easier with in-game collectibles and the dopamine you get from there, because someone else tells you it's something that matters. it can be really hard to decide if something's worth doing or not on your own. I mean, I'm standing here explaining why the last 15 minutes of your life and months of mine were also the one business major who stuck around after the intro could get a sick new idea for an inspirational poster. Only difference between my work and theirs is that I actually had a sense of humor about it, cause fuck business majors. Okay, what do we learn today though? There's always gotta be a lesson aside from fun animal facts. For one, you gotta set your own standards for what's worth your time and attention rather than living off the short-term dopamine you get from what a corporation tells you is important. That goes for just about everything in this fun digital era we find ourselves in. Like the majestic bowerbird, you gotta find the meaning of the act regardless of its form. It doesn't matter if anyone could do it, it doesn't matter how many people have done it, it doesn't matter how many other people will do it, and it doesn't even matter what it is. You have to find the meaning in being someone who did it and got so much better along the way. And don't let collecting turn to hoarding or give in to those compulsions to the point it becomes an addiction. Is that one going to resonate with most people watching this? Probably not. And to those people, I commend your lack of uneasiness at a 20% progress bar that will always be hovering above your account. Genuinely, I mean it. My maladaptive daydreams are about being the type of person who can play Tears of the Kingdom, only beat 48 shrines that just happen to be along the way of the main quest, and finish the game with my ratty armor and weapons. But even then, I still have a massive amount of respect for the people who find such genuine passion in investigating games, finding everything they have to offer, and setting their own personal goals just to show how much they love this hobby. Even better, when they actually donate the money they said was for charity. It took effort not to mention it for this long. Dang!